Hey guys, this is Alex. Thanks for clicking and welcome to this lesson on that and which. Now that and which we use often in relative clauses. So if you look at earlier on the website, we have a lesson on relative clauses that gives a general overview. This lesson will give you a little bit more detail on how to use that and which when you're writing relative clauses. So just as a bit of a review, on the board I have 4 sentences, and we're going to give you a little bit more detail in this lesson about when to use that and when to use which, and is there a difference between the two. So for example, the first sentence that I have here is the movie that we saw last weekend was really good. Now the relative clause here is that we saw last weekend. Again, a relative clause is an adjective clause. So what it does is it gives more information about a subject. So the subject in this sentence is the movie. Okay, so with the movie being the subject, we're giving more information. Okay, which movie? The movie that we saw last weekend. And we're saying that it was really good. So this is an identifying clause. We call this an identifying clause because it specifically identifies the subject. So we cannot just say the movie was really good. Which movie? If you need extra information or essential information that will add to the meaning of the sentence, this is called an identifying clause because we are identifying which movie we're talking about. Okay? So the movie that we saw last weekend was really good. Same thing with the second sentence. So the second sentence, the table which I bought from IKEA was cheap. First of all, identify the subject. What is the subject in this sentence? All right, the table. Now, what is the relative clause here? What is the adjective clause? Well, what about the table? Give me more information about the table here. The table which I bought from IKEA was cheap. So maybe you bought multiple tables and you want to specify that, well, the one that I got from IKEA was cheap. Okay? So these are both examples of identifying clauses. Now, as you can see, we use that and which for both of them. So when you create a relative clause or an adjective clause, the same thing, different names, you can use that and which to give more information about things. So they can begin a clause which has, again, this is a subordinating conjunction plus a subject, verb, object structure, and you will get an identifying clause because you're giving more information that's essential to the understanding of the sentence. In these next 2 sentences, what you'll notice, first of all, is that we're not using that, okay? So first we have a comma here, and we have a comma here. And next sentence we have a comma here, and we have a comma here. So if you watch the previous lesson, you will know that these 2 sentences, for example, Harry Potter, which I finished last week, was an excellent book, and Toronto, which is heavily populated, is a multicultural city. These are non-identifying clauses. So let's write that on the board. And now let's underline the non-identifying clauses. And we're going to talk about why these are non-identifying clauses. Okay, so imagine this sentence here, Harry Potter, which I finished last week, was an excellent book. Do you lose any meaning if you keep the sentence, Harry Potter was an excellent book? Not really. So what this does, what a non-identifying clause is something that gives you more information, extra information about a subject. So your subject here is Harry Potter. Your subject here, Toronto, which is heavily populated, is a multicultural city. You have a subject. And you don't really lose any meaning if you take out the non-identifying clause. So Harry Potter was an excellent book. You still understand my meaning exactly. Toronto is a multicultural city. You understand my meaning. What I'm doing here in the non-identifying clause is giving extra information, non-essential, not necessary information, but it is information that can give you a little bit of a richer meaning to a sentence. Okay? Now, the key thing when you're using that and which is, first of all, we use them to give more information about things. Okay? So computers, movies, tables, desks, books, anything you can think of. Now, where they differ, you can use both, first of all, when you're doing an identifying clause, that and which. So for example, I could also say, the movie which we saw last weekend was really good. I can also say, the table that I bought from IKEA was cheap. But here, if you're doing a non-identifying clause, if you're writing one, you can only use which inside the non-identifying clause. You cannot say Harry Potter, that I finished last week, was an excellent book. You cannot say Toronto, comma, that is heavily populated, comma, is a multicultural city. You must use which. Okay, so if you'd like to test your understanding of that, which, identifying and non-identifying clauses, and test out your writing skills, check out the quiz under this video on engvid.com. Good luck, guys, and take care.